Nintendo's change to 3D Pokémon in 2013 was a surprise for every fan. For once, we're going to be able to see Feraligat's cheeks in all its glory. Oh, they removed it. Even though the 3DS had many disappointments, it was still able to produce 6 of the most beloved games of the Pokémon franchise. Today, we'll find out which of them was the best. To make this comparison as objective as possible, I've broken it down into 4 categories. The winner of each category will receive 3 points. Battle mechanics doesn't really need an introduction. It's the things unique to each game, like Z-moves and Mega Evolutions. Pokemon variety accounts for how many Pokemon the player can encounter in the wild. Post-game content is everything that's available to the player after completing the game. Rivals, evil teams and champions critiques the main supporting cast on how impactful they are on the plot. Now that that's out the way, let's get into battle mechanics. Starting with X and Y, without debate, it's easily one of the most influential modern Pokemon games. What made this game so unique and special was the introduction of Mega Evolution. Being able to add a whole new dimension to your favorite Pokemon was a special feeling that I don't think Game Freak will ever top. Nostalgia bias aside, Mega Evolution completely changed the atmosphere of the battle. It felt more intense and serious. It added a whole new level of strategy. Deciding which Pokemon to use your one-time Mega Evolution on made battles a lot more tactical and enjoyable. Now, let's talk about the Ruby and Sapphire remakes. These games didn't introduce anything new, instead adapting the Mega Evolution gimmick to the latest generation and expanding on it, introducing new Megas and different variations. Ruby and Sapphire took the new feature and pushed it further by implementing it into the main story through the legendary weather trio, Kyogre, Groudon and Rayquaza. An appreciated addition that gave a new breath of life into old legendaries, giving fans that had played the original Ruby and Sapphire a reason to play the remakes. Now for the last game of the category, Ultra Sun and Moon, a tropical experience that showed Game Freak weren't done experimenting. Z-Crystals were the highlight of this region, not only replacing the traditional gym badges, but also adding a one-time use powerful special move that was almost a guaranteed one-shot. The developers also blessed players with the return of Mega Evolution. Unfortunately, it was locked behind post-game, so it was practically pointless since we couldn't even use it in the main story. Why give us such a cool mechanic if we won't even be able to use it for long? It really felt like they were trying to push the Z-move gimmick onto players, which made the whole situation even worse, as a lot of players, including me, felt like Z-moves were just inferior to Mega Evolution. The winner of this category should have been obvious. Without a doubt, Pokemon X and Y takes the cake. It isn't really a surprise when you break it down. They were able to give new life to a bunch of old and underused Pokemon, while also getting fans excited. The reason Ruby and Sapphire doesn't take the spot is because in the end, it just copied X and Y. It didn't revolutionize Pokemon the way Carlos did. But I will take into consideration that it expanded on the already amazing Mega formula. For that, I'll put it in second place. Lastly, we have Ultra Sun and Moon. Sure, they had Z-moves, but it pales in comparison to Mega Evolution. The gimmick wasn't nearly as tactical or fun. You can't compare a one-shot move to an epic transformation that lasted the whole battle. I'm also not going to consider Mega Evolution for this game. You get it post-game, which kinda defeats the whole purpose since there's not much content left to enjoy it with. For that reason, Ultra Sun and Moon comes last. For our next category, we'll be considering how many Pokemon can be found in the wild, starting with the Gen 6 games. Pokemon X and Y were one of the few modern games to still include a national dex. In other words, almost every Pokemon was available to the player at some point in the game. On the release of Pokemon X and Y, there were exactly 721 Pokemon in total. Not considering mythical Pokemon and other select Pokemon that can't be caught without trading, a total of 591 Pokemon were available for capture. Ruby and Sapphire also gives the player the opportunity to find almost every Pokemon in the game, through a new feature known as PokéNav Plus. At the time of release, Ruby and Sapphire shared a Pokédex with X and Y, meaning they also had 721 Pokemon available. Like last time, we won't consider the mythical Pokemon, and we'll also subtract a few odd Pokemon that weren't included, leaving us with 589 Pokemon, or 81.7%. Our final game, Ultra Sun and Moon, adds a new Alolan Pokemon to the mix, at the cost of the national dex. At the time of release, there was a total of 809 Pokemon available. By subtracting mythicals and Pokemon that can't be found in the region, we get the total 406, so roughly 50% of all Pokemon are available in this game. Overall, it's safe to say Ultra Sun and Moon had the least amount of Pokemon available, with only 50%. It's mainly due to the lack of the national dex. The Gen 6 games were a lot closer, being separated only by decimals, but in the end, X and Y slightly edges out Aurus by 0.2%. Now that that's out the way, let's talk about post-game. X and Y, despite having a decent story, there's not much to do after becoming champion. Besides obtaining the national dex and collecting Megastones, there's barely any quests or activities planned out for the champion. There's one quest line that leads to the player being invited to an exclusive sushi place, but many fans including me find it rushed and poorly executed. Thankfully, Ruby and Sapphire does a way better job at keeping the champion occupied, through the iconic Delta episode, introducing us to Xenia, the Lawkeeper. A controversial character to say the least. Her actions into the story are questionable at best, and indirectly lead to the region almost being flooded or cast under a worldwide drought. Whether you enjoy her or not, she carries the postgame, giving the player the opportunity to catch Deoxys and Rayquaza after she's rejected, and provides us with one final challenge. Regardless of her motives and writing, her impact on the postgame is undeniable, and she plays the role of anti-hero well enough to provide an enjoyable experience. Before I even start with Gen 7, there's no doubt that Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon has the most content after becoming champion. It's to the point most players need a whole checklist. Between exploring the legendary wormholes and obtaining the alternate box cover legendary, there's something for every kind of player. The main storyline after conquering Alola is the Rainbow Rocket side quest. Players are pitted against Team Rocket from an alternate timeline, one where Red failed to defeat them. Their mad crusade led them to all the previous regions, where Giovanni recruited other evil masterminds like Ghetsis and Cyrus. And once they reach Alola, it's our jobs to defeat them. This was one of the few times Nintendo executed their ideas well, and the results speak for themselves. A perfect side quest that left the trainer with a sense of accomplishment upon completion. If it wasn't already obvious, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon takes first place for their amazing revival of Team Rocket. Ruby and Sapphire fall short of that standard, earning them second place. And to nobody's surprise, X and Y comes last. On to our final category, arguably the most important of them all, the storyline. Pokemon X and Y is a prime example of great ideas executed poorly. Let's start with our rival. Regardless of the gender, they maintain a kind and supportive demeanor, even when they denied the Mega Ring because we defeated them. It was us who crushed their dreams, yet they don't even exhibit a hint of jealousy or resentment. It just feels forced and ingenuine. The evil team of the region doesn't do much to help the narrative either. The game tries to put a plot twist on the player by revealing Lysander as the evil villain, but it was so obvious from the start. He states he's alright with destroying the world as long as it stays beautiful to the champion. And what does she do about it? Nothing. Instead of taking this man to a psych ward, she just shrugs it off and goes about her day. I remember 12-year-old me sitting there so confused as to why Diantha didn't do anything about it. Luckily, Aurus is written a little better. The champion of Ruby and Sapphire, Stephen Stone, seems to be a lot more active and aware of the issues going on in his region, working with the trainer on multiple occasions to foil Team Aqua and Magma's plans. Our rival, on the other hand, is a totally different case. He's a frail and timid boy who dreams of catching a Pokemon. He has to be the most complex Pokemon rival ever written. During the story, he often falls behind the trainer with a severely underleveled team, but come the final battle, he finally catches up, and as his rival, you can't help but feel bad for him after crushing him in battle. And unlike the X and Y rival, he actually shows real emotion. You can see the disappointment on his face after losing, and yet he still chooses to congratulate the player. This small detail made this scene so much more impactful for me, and honestly cemented Wally as the best rival of all time. Our final game, Ultra Sun and Moon, has a rival that fills the role of an annoying neighbor rather than an adversary. He's too friendly to the player, and that seems to be reflected in his motives too. He doesn't have a drive to get better. Despite being the Kahuna's son, he doesn't seem to be able to replicate his successes. He spends most of the game in the Kahuna's shadow, barely keeping up with the trainer. His only redeeming quality is his unique personality. Despite him failing as a rival, he still embodies the vibes of Alola perfectly. For that reason, I can't completely write him off as a character. The main threats to the region in this game are the Ether Foundation and Team Skull. As the story goes on, it's revealed that Team Skull is mainly comprised of trainers who failed their island challenge. In simple terms, they're mostly harmless, and play the role of a reject gang really well. The true evil team is the Ether Foundation, whose leader is obsessed with Ultra Beast, to the detriment of the entire region. She's also really possessive and abusive of her kids, which is an interesting design choice. In the end, Game Freak did a far better job of hiding the fact that she was evil, and her motives were also unique and unexplored, despite being a little questionable. Now that we've gone over all the games, let's go over the results for this category. In last place is X and Y. I just couldn't ignore the obvious plot holes that destroyed the story's impact. In second place, we have Ultra Sun and Moon, a great story overall, but lacks a competent rival, which really drags its ranking down. Finally, we have Ruby and Sapphire, a Pokemon story done right, interesting rival, a champion that actually cares for the region, an evil team that isn't a complete joke. A fan really can't ask for more, earning a first place finish. Now that we've completed all the categories, let's tally the scores and see who ranks the highest. Before I begin, I'm sure you've seen a lot of issues with my analysis. Maybe I missed a crucial aspect during my comparison, or I skipped over an important character, and if I did, I'm sorry. Leave any corrections in the comments, and I promise I'll respond. Now for the big reveal. After tallying all the points together, these were the final rankings. In last place, we have the final 3DS Pokemon game, Ultra Sun and Moon. Their unique take on the Pokemon League was well received by fans, and made for an exciting adventure, but some of their story features and battle mechanics seemed rushed and only added for the name's sake. In second place, we have X and Y, the first 3DS Pokemon game, and undoubtedly a fan favorite. They introduced a mechanic that shaped an entire generation. For that reason, this game will always have a special place in my heart. And the best mainline Pokemon 3DS game is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It's easily the most well-rounded game. Great story, great Pokemon selection, and the perfect game for fans. It captures the essence of Pokemon in a way that others fail to do so. For that reason, I think it's earned the top of my list. Thanks for watching. If you feel inclined to, leave your rankings below and we can discuss. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!